Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, nice introduction. I am going to be talking about DevSecOps. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of this presentation. But if you don't have time, or you're too shy, or you think of questions later, then my contact details are on the screen just now. And I always welcome people getting in touch with me. So, that's not the button I meant to press. It's this button. So I've split this talk into 3 short sections. And the first section is going to be dealing with DevOps. So I know that the session is entitled DevSecOps, but before we build up to the complexity of 3 different things being done, let's start with 2. And DevOps is a popular approach. It's been around now for quite a number of years, so it should really be well understood. But actually, there's no universally agreed definition of the term DevOps. So there are Wikipedia articles, there are books, there are lots of discussions about it being a mindset or being a joining of Dev and Ops. But there's no real definition, and that's why DevOps gets practiced differently in different organizations. One of the key excerpt that I've taken from the Wikipedia definition is this one. So that DevOps is characterized by the key principles of shared ownership, workflow automation, and rapid feedback. Well, shared ownership and rapid feedback sound quite like Agile, don't they? Workflow automation, maybe less so. At its most successful, DevOps is a combination of specific practices, culture change, and tools. That seems to have quite a resonance with Agile ways of working as well. Bas, Weber, and Zhu, in a paper that they wrote a number of years ago, set it out from a slightly different perspective, that DevOps is practices that are intended to reduce the time between committing a change to a system and the change being placed into normal production, while ensuring high quality. So I'm sure that all of you have some experience with DevOps. Whether it's been good or bad will depend on how it's been adopted in the organizations that you've been working in. A number of people have tried to make DevOps more accessible to the general software development community. Probably the most famous book on the subject is called The Phoenix Project by Gene Kim and et al. And this is quite an Americanized business novel, which tries to tell a story about how DevOps practices can help a failing team deliver functionality. It's a good read. I personally prefer this one by Clark Ching. It's set in the UK, so it's less Americanized, and it deals a lot with the theory of constraints. Another great book trying to show how reducing handovers, focusing on value stream, and eliminating waste can really improve software delivery. But both of these are stories, right? So the Phoenix Project, Rolling Rocks Downhill, they're business novels. They do a good job, but they aren't actually based on research, even though they are informed by the experience of the authors. The book that most deals with the DevOps space and is completely based on empirical research that the authors have undertaken is called Accelerate. I'm guessing that many of you will have heard of the book, and possibly many of you will have read the book also. And in this book, they come up with 4 key metrics that they have found correlate to high-performing teams. These are the lead or cycle time, i.e. how long does it take for something to go from a backlog to being in front of the customer, and the shorter that time can be, the better the team is. Deployment frequency, how often do we release new functionality to our customers, and the more often we can do that, the better. What's the mean time to restore, i.e. if we release something that's bad, how quickly can we get back to a state where the system is working properly? And that should be as short as possible. And then the final metric is the change fail percentage. What percentage of deployments have caused some form of error that needs to be addressed? And of course, the lower that percentage is, the better. So this is me just trying to show that DevOps, which is just trying to bring together development and operations, already has quite a body of literature behind it, quite a body of research, and some really definitive metrics to help you track whether you're on target to deliver benefit to your organization. Now, getting to the place where you have DevOps, so where you have moved from a place where you've got a development organization and an operations organization that are siloed, that don't talk to each other, that don't necessarily work in the same office or the same building, and they may not have a real understanding of each other's roles and responsibilities, skills and expertise, can be hard. A lot of the transformations that I've seen look something like this. The ops team simply gets rebadged as being DevOps. They may have, you may also at the same time deploy a CI pipeline tool. We may get a new source control way of working, but in general, there's no merging of Dev and Ops. What we have is we just have an Ops team that now embraces a little bit more automation. You may be going that, you may not agree with this, or you may have seen other ways of working. I agree that it's excessively cynical, but it's not unfounded. So this is one extreme where essentially we're just rebadging ops, giving them a few more tools and powers to play with, but we aren't actually bringing operations and development any closer together. Another potential transformation is the dream transformation, where development and ops become what am I trying to say? Those skills all exist within one team, and they collaborate, they work together, they are a team. Development and ops are handled by the same group of people. Now, there are some challenges with that, right? Because development skills and operation skills are not the same. So if you are having, if you have a Scrum team of the average size of 7, give or take 2 people, so between 5 and 9, then how many of those people should have development skills? How many of them should have operation skills, such as configuring CI pipelines and ensuring that artifact repositories work correctly, and have environments that can be spun up to run staging and UAT in? So you begin to see that this might be the dream, but if you have a single agile team that is responsible for both development and operations, now maybe those skills are being spread thinly. Maybe the expertise is not being kept up to date across all of the skills that are needed to both develop, deploy, and maintain products in production. And we, as in the Agile community, have become increasingly aware over the past few years of burnout within our teams. People being asked to keep track of too many technologies, deliver products ever faster, and leading to, in fact, the depletion of our developers and our operations staff, which causes a problem on its own. But let's imagine just for a minute that this is a dream, not a nightmare, and that we can have a small agile team responsible for both development and operations. Well, then you've got to think about how we're going to scale this, because typically in an organization, we don't just have one team, we have many teams. So now we need many teams where we have people with both development skills and operation skills. Let's ignore the potential for burnout. How do we get any consistency across the organization? How do we ensure that we are adhering to good practice in the industry? How do we make sure that something that's been learned by one team gets picked up by other teams? These are problems that we have with scaling, not just in DevOps, in all spaces. When we scale, we end up with lots of different environments. We end up with lots of different teams, all trying to deliver value to the customer and to the organization, but possibly without much guidance. The approach that I've seen work in a number of organizations is one of having a platform team. This is a move in a different direction. What we have operations providing self-service tooling for development teams that have the guide rails built into them to prevent the development teams from doing things that are too far off the reservation. So for instance, if you want to configure a new build pipeline, the ops team, rather than just letting you do whatever you want in Circle CI or Jenkins or Cruise Control or whatever it is that you're using today, what the ops team will do, they will build a platform tool which will allow you to spin up a build pipeline that conforms to the certain policies that the company has decided on. And the dev teams can use those platform tools. This has two benefits. One, as I've already said, is about consistency, being able to ensure that all teams are working within strategic policies that have been decided by the organization. But the other is that the development team need less knowledge about these CI tools or other operations tools, which means that they have the small teams can focus on the expertise that they really embody, which is around development and testing in general. So this is an approach that I saw work when I worked at Amazon. I'm fairly sure that there are many other organizations that work in a similar way. So this was by way of a preamble. It's an introduction showing you how DevOps has gone from being something that's been poorly understood through a lot of written words to a place where we can begin to see that it's not enough just to say you're DevOps. You have to provide you have to provide people with the expertise and the training. And when you want to scale across a large organization, you're going to need to at least be cognizant of the fact that unless you provide some form of tooling or strong guidance, you will end up with a very heterogeneous implementation. Each team will use build pipelines in a different way, for example. So that was bad enough. I mean, I know there's been a lot of successes with DevOps, but it's still hard to get to that point where teams are working effectively at bringing dev and ops together and working closely together. That's a big ask. But recently we've had DevSecOps being talked about a lot. And we know why that is. We've had a huge number of security breaches, whether from all sorts of different perspectives. Some of them because developers weren't doing the work in the way that they were expected to, other because the supply chain was compromised. There are many reasons where security can be compromised. And so now what we're saying is, well, let's try and bring development, security, and operations closer together so that the developers are writing code in a secure way, with an eye always on operationally deploying that code and ensuring that it remains secure as operating system patches come out, etc. So the traditional silos, as I've seen them, are a bit like this. In your organizations, they may flow slightly differently, but this is a generalization. Developers write the code. Security will then maybe do an inspection or run some penetration tests and staging or UAT. And then finally, the code artifacts, when security have approved them, and also QA has approved them, go through to ops, they get deployed and monitored in production. So again, the Agile dream would be to have one team with development experience and expertise, security expertise, and operational expertise. This is an even bigger ask than just having dev and ops in a single team. We still don't want to grow the team to be more than 9 people if we can help it. And now we're asking for among these 9 people to have all of these expertises represented. Development changes really quite fast in the sense that JavaScript components get updated on a daily basis. Operations, I think the advances in the operations space is somewhat slower. But in the security space, things happen all the time. This is a space where you have to keep your finger on the pulse. You turn away from the some of the warnings and alerts for a week or so, and you could be hit by a really big problem. So we're really putting a lot of responsibility on a small team to keep their expertise up to date across these three different disciplines, even though they're cooperative and collaborating disciplines. And in fact, DevSecOps are orthogonal concerns. They have really quite different tool sets. They have really quite different knowledge that is needed for them to be able to do their jobs properly. And maybe trying to get a whole bundle of people in a team that have these three orthogonal concerns at the top of their agenda is more than we should be asking for people. A couple of years ago, a VP at GitLab did an online survey, and he asked members of the community who owns security. And there are a number of answers that you can see here on the screen, but mainly what they're saying is that security is something that either the dev team is trusted to do its own, or it's been trusted to somebody else. And this is a problem, because if we don't know, we might have a disagreement about whether we need to have a completely consistent approach to build pipelines. But in any organization where security is important, and I would suggest that's all organizations, then it's really critical that we have a consistent approach to security. And I think this survey showed that we certainly don't have a consistent approach to security across the software development community. And my guess is we don't have a consistent approach to security within most of our organizations. One of the problems that we've got is that people want to take shortcuts, or to put it another way, we may issue guidance in the form of emails or standards within Wikipedia documents or checklists. But when the product owner is asking for something to be released, when the customer is clamoring for a fix, we're going to take the shortest route to getting there so that we can satisfy the people that depend on us. In the architectural world, this is called desire paths. And what we see here is there's a pavement that goes around the corner, but the people that want to go to that house that you see on the left, they don't want to go all the way to the corner and then turn left. They've seen that there's a shortcut and they take it. And the way we get around this in architecture is we put up barriers, we put up fences. And this takes me back to the platform tools that I was talking about earlier. So both with ops and security, we are in a position where if we want to scale across an organization and have consistent application of policy with every team in that scaled organization, the best way of doing this is by providing tools for the development team to use that have built into them those railings to keep them within the company's policy. This, however, shows a platform tool team with an arrow going just in one direction. So ops would be creating tools, security would be creating tools for the development community to use. And this is, in English, we would call this the tail wagging the dog. So the development team need help with the platform, with operations. They need help with security, but they can't just be given tools and told that it has to be this way. Instead, what we need is to have dev enablement, where the ops and security platform teams provide tools based on the specifications that come from the policies of the company, but also specifications and needs of the development teams in the organization. So this is now an approach to delivering DevSecOps in a collaborative way without overburdening our agile teams with too many detailed responsibilities that need to be tracked on a daily basis. And this leads me to my final point, which is about names. You will probably be familiar, at least with the name of William Shakespeare, and in the Romeo and Juliet play, he asked, if we have a flower that is a rose, if we called it a dog, would it smell just as sweet? And obviously the point is that it doesn't matter what we call the rose, it's still a rose. It will still smell just as sweet no matter what we call it. The opposite is also true. If we have something that's really bad, something that stinks horribly, and we call it a rose, it will still stink horribly. So the name, which is quite often what organizations focus on, is not the important thing. The thing that is important is the behaviors which the name is describing. And those behaviors will be either better or worse, irrespective of whether we call it waterfall or agile, irrespective of whether we call it dev and ops or DevSecOps. Philosophers have been talking about this for a long time. This is a picture from Magritte, and it's written, the text written at the bottom is in French, and it says "Ceci n'est pas une pipe," which means this is not a pipe. This is a picture of a pipe. The picture is not an actual pipe. You couldn't smoke tobacco in it. The name is not the thing. We have to understand that names are only useful if they're accurate, if they accurately describe the thing that they are trying to achieve. That's not to say that names aren't important. Names are important. This is a graphic that I've taken from Arlo Belshi, whose excellent article, Naming as a Process, excellent series of articles I highly recommend to everybody to read. And there, he believes there are 7 stages to naming. But the one that I want to call out here is the one that comes in Article 4, which is get to completely honest. I believe in our industry, we are prone to identifying good practices and good behaviors, giving them a name, and then applying that name to in other places where those good practices and behaviors have not been adopted. And DevOps and DevSecOps, and indeed Agile, are in places where I have seen the label being stuck on something that doesn't feel to me like an honest way of describing what's actually going on. So when it comes to DevSecOps, I think either of these approaches are honest. If we have a team that that is responsible for the development, the security, and the operations of a piece of software, that's definitely DevSecOps. If we have a team that is utilizing platform tools provided by ops and security, that is DevSecOps. This is not honest, or rather, we can call it DevSecOps, but it will not deliver the value that either DevOps or DevSecOps promises. So my takeaways for you today are: the name is not the thing. Because someone tells you their team is agile, it doesn't mean that they're working in an agile way. My personal area of expertise is behavior-driven development. And when people tell me they work using behavior-driven development, almost always that turns out not to be the case. The name is not the thing. The name gives you a clue about what the team is trying to achieve, but until you can sit down and look at the behaviors and practices of those teams, you will not be sure whether the name is honestly applied. Burnout is a thing. I've lost many colleagues who have left the industry, had to take time out, and by pushing more and more responsibilities onto a single agile team, we are increasing the risk of burnout, and that risk is significant and is very damaging to the customer and to the organization and to other team members. And finally, platform teams facilitate delivery and scaling consistency. So the security and operational platform teams deliver tools that will be used and are usable by development teams, and that allows consistency as we scale our practices and our policies across multiple teams.